What is up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News and presented by Sticks.com. I am your host, Emma Lingan. I am joined today by Augello and Karine Hains. And we are here to talk about all the latest and greatest news from around the NHL. Yes, it's still coming. The headlines just keep on coming, even though we are in the dog days of summer here. But before we do get into all of the latest storylines from around the NHL in bite-sized format, do want to let you know that we are brought to you by our friends at Sticks.com. Why break the bank on sticks when you can get pro-level composite sticks without the pro price tag at Sticks.com? That's Stix.com. Head over now and gear up. All right, guys. I think one thing that we have to talk about to start with, first of all, is the fact that the Florida Panthers. How many times did you and I say, Mike, coming into the summer, well, they're not going to be able to sign all three of their big free agents. It's going to be one, maybe two if they get lucky, but it's not going to be all three. And here we are at the end of July, and sure enough, they have signed all three. So now looking ahead, they've managed to sign Brad Marchand, they've signed Aaron Ekblad, and now you look at, they're still 3.75 million over the cap right now, which they're allowed to be right now. However, it's gonna have to, something's gonna have to give here. Matthew Tkachuk, injury status, a little bit up in the air right now, so they might get some cap relief there, but even then it won't be permanent. So they're going to need to make room at some point. Mike, how do you think they go about doing this? Do you think it's going to be a trade of a guy like Evan Rodriguez? Maybe he's making $3 million a year for 2 years, or are they going to go about it some other way?
Florida always finds a way. Now, I think you'll start the season with Matthew Tkachuk probably on LTIR. And we've seen from other instances throughout the league over the years, somebody will eventually get hurt. And in that instance, when that happens, then things can move around. Tkachuk can come off LTIR, and, if you have to adjust on the fly, Bill Zito can do that. I don't think that they're going to trade Rodriguez for the simple fact that he's a key member of that team that has won 2 Stanley Cups. Now, I think that there are other possibilities. If you're talking about who to better subtract, whether it be Jesper Boquist or an AJ Greer or somebody, or Uvis Belenskis, and going with 21 men instead of 23, I think all those will be explored by Bill Zito before they decide to trade a guy who has been a key player for them over the last 2 years.
It's interesting, even though he is, a bottom 6 guy, those depth players have been very important for Florida in this run over the last 2 years. Karine, any thoughts on how they might go about this? Because 3.75 million is not insignificant. So they're going to have to do something to get around that.
Well, to be fair, I think because there's a shortcoming of center on the market this offseason, I wouldn't be surprised if Bill Zito decided to explore that idea. Whilst, well, what Mike said made sense as well, I think it could be a good idea to explore because, Bill Zito always finds a way, and they've got other options to cover if they do move Rodriguez, and that's an easy 3 million to take off, and there'd be a lot of suitors for him as well. So
Yeah, it definitely will be interesting to see what happens there. All right. Another playoff team from last season, and we talked about them earlier in the week, is the Winnipeg Jets. So they've got most of their core locked up after they extended Gabe Vilardi, which is what we talked about earlier this week. Mike and I did on the show, and they've got 2 big extensions now to work on for next summer. So already they got their business done for this year. Now we're already looking ahead to next year. But they've got some big names that are going to be up for extensions next year, and Kyle Connor primarily, and then Cole Perfetti as well. So Connors is going to be an unrestricted free agent. Perfetti will be a restricted free agent. Um, of course, now they have offloaded Nikolai Ehlers. He's now with Carolina, so that's cleared significant cap space for them. But still, I mean, what do you think, Mike, with the cap going up, especially? What do you think these extensions, these AAVs, might look like for these two players in Connor and Perfetti?
Well, if Kevin Cheveldayoff wants to keep the cap hit down on Kyle Connor, he can just point to the Four Nations final against Canada where they scratched Kyle Connor puzzlingly. Seriously, though, this is a guy who regularly scores 30 to 35 goals. On a good year, he scores over 40, and he's been on a contract that they can't complain about. He was $7.1 million the last 5 years, and this is the final year of the deal. I think if he stays there, he's going to have to be prepared to take a little bit of a discount like Connor Hellebuck, like Mark Scheifele did. But with the cap going up, he's probably going to be the highest paid player on the Jets, probably around $9 million. If he takes 8.5 and he equals out what Scheifele does, and they can't give him 8 years anymore because with the new CBA, the most they can give him is 7. That would bring him to age 36. Then that's possible. But with Perfetti, he's a restricted free agent with arb rights. This is the second year on that bridge deal. I honestly think that they probably, go to arbitration and push the cart down the road a little bit and say, okay, you want a big contract, you're going to have to prove it one more year. They have the cap space. They just don't seem to be a cap team in terms of getting right to the edge of the cap. So they have the money. It's just a question of whether they want to spend it or not.
Yeah, Corinne, how do you think they go about this? Because like Mike said, there's so many teams out there. I mean, we just finished talking about Florida, teams that are up against the cap or over the cap. Winnipeg doesn't have that problem, and yet we're still having this discussion as to how low can they keep these salaries and how economical can they be. So what do you think happens with these two players?
Well, wherever you are against the cap, whether you're up against it or not, I think it just makes good sense to keep the cap hit as low as you can. It's just, good sense, good economical sense. But for Connor, I think Mike's onto something with his 9 million. I mean, I was looking at comparables earlier, and I thought perhaps something along the line of what Matthew Tkachuk is making. He's making 9.5 a year, and his importance to team kind of similar to Connor with Jets. So I'm thinking perhaps something along those lines. But it's hard to predict considering the cap is going up so much. You don't know how much the players will want to get considering that's going up. And the other thing is they could give him 8 years if they sign him before the new CBA kicks in, which is what I think mid-September. So if they do it early in the summer, they can still say, hey, 8 years, we can still do it. So, that might be a way to make him act fast. As for Perfetti, that's hard to say, I mean, when the Canadians signed Slavkovsky to a long-term deal, people were saying, wow, it's really early, he hasn't shown much. And Perfetti's in the kind of the same territory. He's got, like, what, 222 games played, 125 points. That's not huge numbers, is it? So it's kind of hard for a team to commit and, long term. It's a gamble, and like you said, Winnipeg is quite good at keeping the cap hit low. So I'm not sure they're ready to give him that kind of long term deal.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They're a team too that I think is facing a certain amount of pressure as well, constantly getting to the playoffs and then having these unceremonious early exits. A lot of the blame goes on goaltending, I think, but there can certainly be some pressure to go around there in Winnipeg. So we'll see how what kind of urgency that they have with these contracts going forward. Um, one of the teams that I think was just a really great storyline to follow in the NHL last season was the Columbus Blue Jackets. Of course, they started the season or the off season with just the unimaginable tragedy of losing Johnny Gaudreau. in the tragic way that it happened. And then, of course, going on, even with Gaudreau, I don't think that they were necessarily expected to be, a guaranteed playoff team. And yet, they defy the odds. They go on a really impressive run. They fell just short of making the playoffs, which I think still is much better than a lot of people were expecting them to do. Then you go ahead, you look at what they've done this offseason. They made some depth additions. They got Charlie Coyle, they got Miles Wood. Mike, looking at what this Columbus team did last year and the additions they've made, they also were able to re-sign Dante Fabro on the defense as well. So looking at everything that they've done here, do you think that they're going to sort of pick up where they left off this upcoming season in Columbus? Or was this just kind of a one-off good, feel-good story?
It's tough to really gauge. I mean, you can't underestimate the rallying around the tragedy and the motivation that caused. Now, this is a team with a lot of young talent. Voronkov and Marchenko are in their mid-20s. You've got Adam Fantilli and Kent Johnson who are in their early 20s. They had a phenomenal year out of Zach Werenski, a Norris Trophy caliber. He's a finalist for the Norris. I think they're going to have to depend on all their youngsters to step up. Coyle and Wood playing in the bottom six, I think will help them in terms of depth. One factor I think is sort of under the radar is the fact that Ellis Merzlikins was very, very average last year. And at the end of the year, Jet Greavves was the goalie who sort of took over and was the guy. But Tarasov is now gone. He's the backup in Florida. So if Jet Greavves is the starter there, maybe they have a chance to make the playoffs. But they're going to have all these things that I just mentioned checked off are going to have to fall into place for them to be a contender for a playoff spot.
Well, and even with Greavves, I mean, he's still a young and relatively unproven goaltender, so you never really know what to expect after that. I mean, we saw what happened in Vancouver with Archer Shilovs. He took a step back when he came back the next season after making that really impressive playoff run. So nothing is guaranteed, like you said. Karine, what do you think when you look at the Blue Jackets and what you expect from them this season?
Mike actually stole what I was going to say. I was going to talk about Jet Greaves because, funnily enough, in the playoffs in the AHL, the Monsters played the Laval Rocket, and Greaves was not good. The Rocket won in 5 games, and Greaves didn't look like the guy who carried the Blue Jackets. So, was that a one-off? Is he going to come back and be great again? I don't know, but I wasn't impressed in the playoffs by him at all. So I'm thinking if he's not the solution, I'm not sure they can actually make it this year.
Yeah, lots of a lot is going to ride on goaltending. I mean, look at, again, we just got through talking about Winnipeg, and goaltending in the playoffs is very important, but you got to get to the playoffs first. And so having a solid situation in goal there is going to be key. I think all of your points totally valid about Columbus here. We're reaching the point in the offseason now. Pretty much any major moves have been made. Most of the dust has settled here. We're still waiting on some RFA contracts to get signed, but for the most part, like, not a ton left, not a ton happening on the free agent market. However, there is one intriguing free agent who still remains on the market, and that is Max Pacioretty. So he signed a PTO in Toronto ahead of this past season, ended up making the team. He had 13 points in 37 games. He also had 8 points in 11 playoff games. So really came up in the clutch for them when they needed it. Now, again, he's 36 years old, so I don't think you're signing him to be a top 6 forward anywhere. But knowing that he's got, it looks like he still has some left in the tank. I mean, Mike, do you think that there are teams that should be targeting him if he's still willing and able to play? And if so, what would a potential contract look like for him?
It sounded at the end of the Leafs playoff run, which was only 2 rounds, that that Patcheri was ready to hang them up. But then after about a week or so, it sounded as if he was willing to come back. And Brad Treliving indicated that the door was open for him to come back to Toronto. So that would be my first inkling, is that he would go back to the Maple Leafs. But it hasn't happened yet. With Toronto, they're trying to move out guys like David Kampf and Kalle Järnkrok and clear some salary. So it may be on hold until that happens. There are a couple of intriguing possibilities. One is he's a Long Island guy. One possibility was the Islanders, but apparently he lives in Michigan. So, maybe the Detroit Red Wings. But there have been some rumors about him going back to Montreal, and I don't know whether that is what Montreal is looking for. Based on what I think their needs are. I think they need a veteran top six guy who will be there all the time. He played 37 games. He was injured 3 times last year. So they don't need somebody who's going to be in and out of the lineup. They have enough Josh Andersons as it is. They need somebody who's going to be there all the time, and that might not be where Pacioretty is any longer.
For anyone who is listening to this episode and not watching on YouTube, I am sorry that you missed Karine's facial expression when Mike mentioned the possibility of Pacioretty going back to Montreal. Karine, would you like to share your thoughts on that? Because it seems like you have a lot to say.
Well, basically, it's not happening. I mean, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton are all about going for youth right now. They're not going to bring back Max Pacioretty, who's always injured. I mean, he's 36 years old. You're trying to rebuild the team here. You're not going to go for an older forward who's always injured and has not won anything yet. I mean, that's a mistake the Maple Leafs always did. They brought Pavelski. Who did they bring? Joe Thornton. They brought Patrick Marleau. They always went for the veteran, wasn't one. And Montreal's not going to do that, Mike. Canadians are not the Leafs.
That they are not. But both teams going to be very interesting to keep an eye on this year, I think, with you've got, the Canadians, like you said, are sort of on the upswing and very up and coming team. I think it's going to be much more interesting for this rivalry when both teams are competitive at the same time. So this will be interesting to see where he ends up. All right, switching over to some Olympic talk for a minute here. We now know that the entire coaching staff from Canada's Four Nations team that won the gold medal at the Four Nations face-off is going to be returning for the 2026 Olympics. So in review, that would be head coach John Cooper, and then assistants, you've got Bruce Cassidy, Pete DeBoer, Rick Tocchet, Misha Donskoff, and Dave Alexander. So do we think, Mike, I'll ask you first, do you think that means that they're going to be bringing a similar roster back to the Olympics as well? Because if you look at Canada, really all of the teams, particularly Canada and the US, I mean, there's plenty of depth to go around there. So there were some key names that weren't on the Four Nations rosters that have been talked about could, be eventually added to the Olympics. But do you think the return of the exact same coaching staff is going to have any sort of carry any sort of weight on that? Or do you think that there are other players who can make a case to join the Olympic team who weren't already there?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the rules are different. Whereas with the Four Nations, the rosters were 23 players. I believe the roster limit for the Olympics is 25. So there would be 2 more spots. Now, I looked over the Team Canada roster. The one player that sort of stands out because of his injury history is Mark Stone. If he's healthy, I think he makes it. If he's in and out of the lineup or on LTIR like he's been many a time, you could see some young players like Macklin Celebrini or Connor Bedard if he has a big year. On defense, does Drew Doughty make it? Do they go younger on defense? I mean, Thomas Harley played really well in a pinch. And there are a couple of options on the blue line. Goaltending, I don't think there are many options there. It's probably going to end up being Binnington, Aiden Hill, and Samuel Montembeault. But I think there could be a couple changes to the lineup.
Well, Karine, I'll ask you, our resident Canadian here on the show today. Do you think that we are going to see any major roster changes for Team Canada from what we saw at the Four Nations?
Major changes? I don't think so. But, the fact that the staff is returning, you've got to keep an open mind. You've got to keep an eye on who's out right now and who's not. If one of your players did well at the Four Nations isn't having a good season, then you have to move on because the Olympics, it's a 2-week tournament. You don't have time for people to find their form. That's not going to happen. If you're not hot going in, you're not going to get hot in there. As for goaltending, I'm not sure Montalbo makes it. I think maybe Logan Thompson would be a good choice. But as for which players could actually make it, I would make a case for Nick Suzuki. I don't know if you saw what he did in the tail end of the season, but he put the team on his back and carried them. He had multiple games where he scored multiple points and he was just all over the ice doing everything. It was just like if anyone from Team Canada was watching, they have to have taken notice because he was just, I know that, he wouldn't be playing the same role as he does with the Canadian. He wouldn't be the first line center. That's a given. But Suzuki can do anything. He can play the PK, he can play the PV, he can do everything. So I think it would be short-sighted not to consider him, to say the least.
Well, that is a perfect segue. I'm glad you bring him up because I do want to ask a question about the Canadiens, Karine. Coming up this season for them, it's going to be a critical year. It's going to be a contract year for Kirby Dach. So obviously, this is a player who's maybe struggled to find his footing a bit, and injuries have certainly played a part in that. As he's going into this contract year, I mean, you just talked about Suzuki and how incredible he's been as their first line center. But if you go down, down the depth chart there, where do you see Dach fitting in? Or I guess maybe the better question would be, who will be the Canadiens' second line center this year? Because, are they going to give it to Dach, give him a chance to prove himself, or has he just not done enough to earn that yet?
I think they've decided that they're gonna give it to him, but it's gonna be kind of a last chance saloon type of thing because at the end of the year, in their presser, Jeff Gorton actually said that Doc, when he showed up at camp last year, wasn't in the best shape. They were not impressed with that, and then he got injured again. So basically, he's been put on notice that you have to show up in better shape. And the thing this year as well is that they have Ivan Demidov, so they've got a very good winger there. And, they're kind of hitching to have a real top six, a line that's going to take some pressure off the Suzuki line. And they need Doc to step up. I mean, he was acquired to be the second C. Can he be the second C? Nobody knows. I mean, they've also gone out and acquired Zach Bolduc this offseason. And while he's a winger, he did play center in the junior at one point, and he's been asked by the Canadians to work on his faceoffs as well. Plus, he's a left shot. The Canadians do not have a left shot center. So that's kind of a possibility, I think. It'll be interesting to see, but a lot is going to depend on Doc's actual shape at camp. If he's like last year, they might get annoyed and move on, to be honest, but time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell. Mike, what do you think? Do you think that is it even if he does come into camp in good shape, is it going to be too little, too late? What do you expect from him and from the Canadians' top six this year?
I think they'll give him an opportunity early in the season to, prove the doubters wrong. But I look at the Canadians and I don't see their second line center on their roster currently. I mean, we talked last week about, the rumors about Nazem Kadri and his willingness to waive his no move clause to go to Montreal. Knowing Kadri from Toronto, he has been a lifelong Montreal Canadiens fan. It would be a dream of his to play in Montreal, and it would be a dream of mine to see him torpedo the Canadiens' playoff chances like he torpedoed Toronto's 2 years in a row. But seriously, I think that I understand what Karine is saying in terms of Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon looking to, maybe add somebody who's not 34 years old. But I think this team took a step last year. And if Demidov is as good as people think he is, and I potentially think he is as a Calder Trophy candidate with that top line, if you add a veteran like a Kadri, the Eastern Conference is not impossible to navigate through. So I don't think the number 2 center at the end of the season is on their roster right now.
Yeah. Again, if you're not watching this episode, you missed another A+ facial expression from Karine when Mike mentioned the possibility of Nazem Kadri in Montreal. Just making dreams come true, whether it's his, whether it's Mike's dreams. That's all we're doing here today.
Karine and I have known each other too long. That's why she's getting this reaction.
Yeah, we go back a long time in this kind of a history of trying to make the other react. So you're not surprised here today.
Hey, don't take the bait, Karine. Stay strong. It's all right. We're gonna move on, and we're gonna talk about the New Jersey Devils here. Pivot here because this is another team that I think has a lot of pressure on them heading into this season. We've got this was a team that was really poised at the start of the season to potentially make a deep playoff run, or at least that's what they were hoping. Then, of course, you had the injury to Jack Hughes. They still made the playoffs, but it was a very quick time for them in the playoffs, out very quickly. So do you think, though, I mean, obviously, of course, they didn't have Hughes in the postseason. Do you think, Mike, I'll ask you first, do you think that having Hughes back and having a healthy Hughes back is going to be enough to push for a deeper playoff run next year? Or should they have done more? And just by a quick way of recapping here, what they've added this summer includes Connor Brown, Evgeny Dodonov, and then they re-signed Cody Glass and Jake Allen. So just looking at those, no major moves besides getting Hughes back. So do you think that they're in a better position to make a deeper run next season, or should they have done more?
I think they should have done more. I'm not sure how they could have done more, though. I mean, Connor Brown and Dodonov are solid middle 6 additions. Brown, Sheldon Keefe knows Brown from his days in Toronto, and he's been a good player and a good pro for a number of years. I mean, it all rests on Jack Hughes being able to stay healthy. And as we've seen over the last few years, he's a phenomenal player. He just can't stay healthy. It's whether he's a smaller player, and that's they have to sort of get lucky that he gets hurt not at the end of the season, but maybe early to middle of the season, and then he's healthy enough to be there when it counts in the playoffs. But I think they're a solid team. They don't have the goaltending problems that they used to. With Markstrom and Allen is a solid one too. If Dougie Hamilton is completely healthy, then their defense is a lot better. They just need Jack Hughes to be Jack Hughes and to be there when it counts.
Karine, what do you think? Injuries or timing of Jack Hughes injuries aside, do we think that if he is healthy, we're just going to, toxic positivity here, we're going to assume that he's healthy by the time they get to the playoffs in New Jersey? Do you think with this roster, the way it's currently constructed, is well positioned to make a deep playoff run?
Well, I don't see Connor Brown and Dodonov as big enough additions to actually guarantee that they can, take a deep run. I'm on board with re-signing Jake Allen. He's a solid backup and he thrives as a number 2. When he's a number 1, it gets a bit shaky, as we've seen in Montreal over the years. But when he's the second goalie, he's doing very well. Now, could they have done more? That's the question. I mean, the they wanted to do more. That much was obvious at the end of the season. They actually said after they were eliminated that there would be changes. But it's one thing to want to make changes, and it's another one to be able to make them, because you've got to find the right fit on the market. And I don't think that they have found the right fit to make, meaningful enough additions to guarantee a deep run.
All right. Well, let's talk about for a moment the team that eliminated the Devils from the playoffs this past offseason. That would be the Carolina Hurricanes. And obviously, they've made some big moves this offseason. They signed primarily being Nikolai Ehlers, who we mentioned earlier when we were talking about Winnipeg. But they did make another signing, another extension this past week. They signed Jackson Blake to an 8-year, $45 million contract. So that's about $5.625 million AAV. It will begin in the 2026-27 season. So not this coming season, but the next one. Blake, he's only 21 years old. He's turning 22 on August 3rd. He was drafted in the 4th round in 2021. He had 34 points in 80 games as a rookie this past season. So, of course, he then went on to have 6 points, 3 goals, 3 assists, and 15 Stanley Cup playoff games for Carolina. Mike, again, I mean, kind of taking a risky bet here on such a young and relatively unproven player, but looking at the cap going up and the fact that they were able to get him locked in for 8 years at what I think will end up being, by the time the cap has gone up some more, will end up being a really affordable price. What do you think of this signing for Carolina?
It will be an affordable price if he builds on this and becomes a 50 to 55 point forward. I mean, he's got great NHL bloodlines. His father, Jason, was a longtime NHLer. He had a great collegiate career at North Dakota. 34 points as a rookie is nothing to sneeze at. So they're optimistic that he is going to build on that season and become a solid contributor. But I refer to this as an Eric Tulsky, Thomas Dundon special. It's like if you can get a bargain, why not? But they never seem to spend big money on the right thing, which is goaltending. And when they had a chance to spend it on keeping defensemen like Brett Pesce or Brady Shea in Carolina, they decided to let them go. And I don't think their defense is as good. But, they have paid guys like Svechnikov. They have paid guys like Seth Jarvis. And now they're paying Jackson Blake.
Karine, what do you think with this signing? Because, again, it seems to me just like awfully risky to commit that much time. Forget about the money, but just the time, 8 years to a 21-year-old who you've only seen play for one season.
Well, what I'm going to say here is that I'm not entirely surprised. I mean, it's something we've seen the Hurricanes do with who? Oh, yeah, Kotkaniemi for 8 years. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to end up the same way, but I'm getting like a deja vu here. When I saw that, I was like, someone's not learning. I mean, where was the rush? I know if he breaks out, he's going to be more expensive, but there are times where it's, worth waiting to be sure that you've got something really good on your hands before you put pen to paper for 8 years. I mean, come on. But, I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Well, think of it this way. They've got 5 years before they can get the 1/3 buyout on him to determine whether he should, because Kotkaniemi, there was talk about him being bought out because it's instead of a 2/3 buyout, it was a 1/3 buyout. So they have time. But I just, I sometimes do not understand the methodology of the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what's going on there. I mean, I think on one hand, though, if you're seeing what's going on around the league with the cap going up, that a lot of these contract negotiations that you're seeing are, you're seeing the teams fighting for longer term. And then the players are fighting for shorter term, higher AAV. So at the end of the day, maybe this benefits the Hurricanes, but again, only time will tell, because he's gonna have to step up and build on that rookie season, which was a solid rookie season. So we'll see what happens there. All right, want to wrap up today with just one quick topic. The New York Islanders, who we mentioned earlier, I think Mike, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about Max Pacioretty. So they were able to avoid salary arbitration with Maxim Ciplakov. They signed him to a 2-year deal with a $2.5 million AAV. So just to review, 26 years old, he had 35 points in 77 games this past season, his first NHL season. So what do you think of this deal, Mike? Fair for both sides? Could one side have gotten more? What do you think?
I mean, I think, economical signing by Matthew Darch and the Islanders. This is a player who came over at 25 years old as an undrafted free agent from the KHL after scoring 31 goals and, played pretty well. And I think his place with the Islanders right now, and them signing him to a 2-year deal, with them bringing over Shabanov from the KHL, another player who had a big year. I think they wanted to have another Russian sort of to lead the way, and they have Alexander Romanov as well. But I think that they saw those two as a sort of a combo, and they're not spending big money. I mean, the money that they're spending on him is, with the cap going up, is not really significant. So I think it's a good signing.
Karine, what do you think of this signing?
Completely agree. And I would say whenever you're able to avoid arbitration, it's a win. I mean, I work in law, and my firm at one stage was doing salary arbitration files, working for teams. And it's all about picking a player apart. I mean, I was reading through it sometimes, and it's just like, oof. I can only imagine the player hearing, a team say, "Here's why you don't deserve the money you want." I mean, that makes so much damage to a relationship with a player and team, and 2.5 million in NHL terms is nothing. So yeah, good on them.
Yeah, definitely for an amount like that. Like you said, in NHL terms, very little, not worth ruining a relationship over like that. So definitely think it'll be a good deal, maybe a really good deal for the Islanders if Ciplakov can build on what he did this last season and maybe produce even more. So we will have to see. But for the time being, that is going to do it for today's episode of The Wraparound. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to watch or listen. Hopefully you were watching to get Karine's great facial expressions whenever Mike said something. But if not, we thank you for listening anyway. Thank you, as always, to Stix.com for sponsoring us as well. For Karine Hains and Michael Augello, I'm Emma Lingan. This is The Wraparound, and we will see you next time.